Hi, I'm Yasmin Owusu, and this is my producer, Charlie Kesenek.
I'm your husband, and you're using all my stuff right now. What are you talking about?
So anyway, I've been looking for a one-stop shop podcast for wellness, amateur sociology, psychology, pop culture, and whatever else sparks my interest. So I created one. We are limited to no lanes. We hit the gas and get into it. This is Peaked. Press play.
Hi, welcome to Peaked Podcast. I'm Yasmin. We're back for another week of Peaked. It's actually our 30th episode today. Can you imagine? 30 weeks worth of episodes. And yeah, I said that awkwardly for a reason because technically I have 29 weeks, but 30 weeks worth of episodes because 1 week we did 2 and we did Charlie's producer husband Charlie's special episode for his record release, Symmetry Music. So yeah, I have 30 weeks worth of episodes, and that is uncharacteristically consistent for me. While I get curious about a lot of stuff and I like to try things and I like to tinker around and figure them out, I will tend to get to a point of being adequate at something and then just fluttering along to the next thing. So I really wanted to approach when I started this podcast, this project with the idea of first just making it exist and then making it good. And I'm still learning how to do that and still bumping along, trying to make it good. But I'm proud of myself that I'm sticking with it and that I'm not just I'm trusting the process. I'm not looking for instant gratification. I don't expect it to blow up overnight. And that's not going to be the metric of whether I want to do it or not. So yeah. And that's why this is the last episode no, I'm kidding. Can you imagine? And I did that and that now it's over. No, we're sticking with it. I've been really encouraged by, I haven't exactly lit the world up with my podcast yet, but I've seen a trickling of little subscriptions and it means the world to see people consistently come back. And, I also really appreciate feedback, especially with technical things that make this easier to consume. I'm not, a tech pro of any kind. So there's certain things I don't even know that you could do. A listener told me really recently that you can kind of add these subcategories, essentially chapterize your episode. So if someone maybe doesn't like long intros, like the what I'm rambling on now, they could skip that and it just is all time stamped. So I'm implementing that from this episode on, and stuff like that is super helpful. You may think that people know this stuff, but I'm extremely geriatric millennial and I just, need a little help sometimes. But yeah, very proud of getting this far. 30 episodes. That's 10 episodes. Damn, I did that math. But yeah, I am going solo this week. Producer husband Charlie has been kind enough to join me for the last couple of episodes. And I just figured I'd go back to basics. Back to where it all began, me and my little corner of my room and a few topics. But actually it's really just kind of one topic with some subheadings, which I will timestamp. I wanted to talk about a few women in media right now who are kind of cusping a canceling or just causing controversy. And, last week we had the Manosphere episode. So I think we covered some controversial men there, and who knows, maybe I'll put out an episode about why Shia LaBeouf is terrorizing New Orleans and probably the entire South or whatever. I'm sure I'll get to it, but this week it's going to be the women. Being a woman, I just would like to kind of dig into some of these, and it's not going to be should we cancel them, should we not, because I'm not the judge, juror, and executioner on that. I'm just going to maybe see where my head's at on it and flesh that out as we go. Starting off with Miss Chappell Roan. So for a little background, she is a singer. I mean, I think everyone knows who Chappell Roan is. Hot to go, right? And Pink Pony Club. I am not the hugest fan, but I mean that in a way that I'm not I don't listen to her all the time or whatever, but I actually do when I hear her music and it's, her pop songs come on, her major hits. I find them entertaining. I think that her kind of aesthetic whole thing is cool. I like the whole female drag queen thing. And I think that I can appreciate her in a way that other people appreciate Lady Gaga. Like I kind of like her spin on it a little bit better of the kind of like crazy stage presence or persona, whatever. And I do think she's a really decent songwriter and a really good singer. She has got good pipes. So I'm saying that I'm not the hugest fan, not to diminish her talent, because I think she's a good amount of that. It's more to say that I can be unbiased here. You're not like talking to like a closet, like Chappell Roan, like fan club member or anything like that. So recently she has been under fire. I always like people say under fire. It's so intense. Recently she's been under fire in the media for, I guess, curbing a child fan. So the story is essentially that she's sitting to breakfast and a kid approaches her, I think like a preteen, or walks up to her table just to kind of be like, is it really her? And then walks back where they came from. And a little while later, up comes this huge security guy to this child's table, and the guy is like kind of yelling at her mom and just being like, you should teach your kid to know better than to approach strangers. And, very strong worded, especially around a kid. And we know about this because this child's dad or stepdad, a soccer player from Brazil named Jorginho Freo. So listen, I speak French, Italian, and English, and a little Spanish. I don't speak Portuguese, but yes, it's something like Jorginho Freo. He was this kid's stepfather, but he's actually married to Jude Law's ex. So this is Jude Law's kid that Chappell Roan supposedly sicked her security guard on, right? So since this incident, which this soccer player made public, basically, blasted her in public for, put out a whole post just being like, she's rude to her fans. How could you treat a kid this way, right? So Chappell Roan has responded through an Instagram post, I believe, saying essentially, that was not my personal security. I did not sick anybody on anybody. That security was working for the hotel and not for me personally. So the security guard kind of corroborates that. He says, I was not, Chappell Rowan's personal security. I'm responsible for my own actions. I don't think he said that he was just the hotel security. Actually, there's some rumor that he was Sabrina Carpenter's security. I don't know. But either way, he corroborates that she did not send him to go do that. I don't think that Jorginho or Jude Law's ex-wife really agree with that. They seem to say that he appeared to be with Chappell Roan. They were conversing. They seemed to be like together, and he seemed to be on her team in some respect. And she was within earshot. So if that's someone she knew, even if she didn't send him, that maybe she should have intervened. I don't know. It got a little convoluted at that point, but they seem to not really believe her account of that. I will say, whether or not this exact instance happened, there was someone who found a video of her at an airport. This was some time before, where she's with a big security guard and someone is filming her from a distance, and she catches it and she kind of points it out to her security guard, who then goes and intervenes with that. So whether this exact instance happened or not, it's not exactly off-brand for her. We've also seen her kind of cursing out photographers, basically being like, you shut the fuck up, to like photographers on a red carpet. She also has just publicly been interviewed and said that she doesn't know why people think they could just approach her and give her a hug. Like, she's just, in her words, she's like, I'm just some random bitch. Like, why would you think, So even though she really did want to clarify, I didn't have a huge security guy go and deck a kid. I will say we can just operate on the premise that she in general has a boundaried approach to the public. So here's the thing. I actually, when I saw her kind of coming to prominence, found her approach kind of refreshing. I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with being more boundaried with media if you are someone who's offering a talent. I don't think she's selling herself to us as like the people's princess. She's not trying to be Princess Diana, right? She's a talented singer. She's a performer. When you pay money, and I say you because I do not, but when you pay money for her concerts, when you download her music, if anyone's still doing that, if you stream her music, you're paying for her talent, for her songwriting, for her singing, for her maybe dancing, for her like performance, for her costumes. You're not paying to know her, and you're not paying for her to feel like your bestie, right? And I don't know that I'm always super comfortable with people's kind of parasocial relationships with celebrities and their belief that they owe them anything more than the talent they're advertising. So I think an instance maybe that is a little hairier for me is when she's on a red carpet and she's screaming at a photographer. Like, I don't know if the photographer said something really demeaning to her, in which case she's absolutely justified. Nobody, even if you're in a paid environment, should ever be allowed to be derogatory, demeaning, or abusive to you. But I think if you are putting yourself in the position and with your record company, with everyone agreeing that you're going to do press, I think that maybe is more a situation where you are making yourself available and the expectation is to be photographed. So maybe there should be a bit more of a professional approach to that. But I don't think she owes every fan a very, meaningful interaction at all. And I think it's perfectly fine if you just are that kind of open person and you enjoy that. And we've conversely seen, Bella Hadid just kikiing with everybody on the streets, and that seems to be comfortable for her. But I don't think it should preclude you from being an entertainer, a singer, an actor, a dancer, a tinker, tailor, soldier, man, if you are also not a people person. As long as you're providing something in some kind of talent, service, whatever, that shouldn't also just be something that we all need to feel entitled to as well. And I don't think it's ended well for a lot of people who do make themselves that open to the public at all times. I mean, I mentioned Diana earlier. And, we have, the Britney Spears, we have the Amanda Bynes, and, all these young women who were so put out in the press and way before, at ages before they could really understand what that beast was going to be. And I think it can really be detrimental long term to a lot of people, not just women. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with her being boundaried. And if she is a rude person, I don't really care. I mean, and I'm not even her hugest fan, but it's like, can she sing? Like, I think if she's, out here, tweeting racist or, bigoted or insane things, then this could be a different thing. But if you just don't think she's like a nice girl to have a drink with, you don't have to have a drink with her. Just listen to her music or don't, right? So that's kind of where I land on all of that. I don't really care if she's super nice. I don't think she has to, and if she is nice to people she knows, and she's just a bit more of an insular person, she's more of an introvert, or she's just someone who is not, that open with strangers. I mean, that should be okay, right? But yeah, I'm sure she was not super excited if this kind of thing was going to happen, that it was going to be with like Jude Law's daughter. But that's where I land on that. There's wiggle room in there too. I mean, there's a lot that I don't know, like how is she actually like treating her staff, all of that stuff. Like if, she's being like nasty in a way that is like, if it's like an Ellen situation, that's a whole different thing. But I don't think I've seen anything to really suggest that. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And then, another one I wanted to talk about was Doja Cat, Miss Doja Cat. She has had kind of controversy swirling around her for quite a while, like being a super geriatric millennial, like clawing at being Gen X. I wasn't aware of her as early as some. And by the time I became aware of her, people had already dug up these like old rumors / pictures or whatever of her being on these incel chat lines, or people were calling incel chat lines. Or chat rooms. What am I saying? Chat lines. Showing my age. Incel chat rooms, entertaining, white supremacists and incels, and just kind of like laughing at their racist jokes. And these are things that people were saying about her when I became aware of her. I'd heard a bunch of her music. I mean, it was kind of impossible to avoid at one point, but I hadn't put a name to the songs. And when I became aware of that all of these hits were this person, I was like, oh, okay, wow. Like, it's quite a prolific pop songwriter. But along with finding out that about her, I found out all this other stuff, right? And that she had also had a song, and I don't want to repeat the actual phrase, but that had a phrase that is commonly used by racist or anti-Black people to mock police brutality victims that are Black. So she had a phrase that used a song that used that phrase. But her response to that was that she had used that phrase in her song because it's a, an adage or whatever that people throw around that has hurt her in the past. And she wrote a song in response, and she says it was bad lyrics and it wasn't a particularly good song, and she wouldn't sing it again if she had the chance, kind of thing. And as for the other rumors / allegations about her being in these chat rooms and entertaining these people, and people were saying that she would like strip for these white supremacists and be like, I don't want to be Black, but at least I'm thick. Like things like that is what people were saying about her. And they had like, I guess some people had like screenshots of her in those rooms or whatever, and like little videos. But her response has been that she was in a lot of chat rooms when she was younger. And that's how she socialized, but she was also an admin on them, and she would actually ban and block people who would say racist and whatever, just things that were unsavory. So she says that essentially she was never involved in any of those kinds of conversations. She was never present in the room or interacting with anyone who was conversing in that way. And that's her take on that. And she also says that she's always been very proud of her Black heritage, and she's never tried to subvert her Black heritage. She's been accused of doing that as well. But, I could only find what I could find, which is like there are these like photos of her and like, other guys in like little picture boxes, but I didn't hear anything really racist being said in those moments. But people say that there was, and that she was present for that because they were also in those if they were also in those chat rooms, what were you doing in there, sir? But anyway, those are things that I've heard about her over the years, right? And I'm mentioning her now because this is all very old fodder, right? Mentioning her now because she just recently did a concert in South Africa, where she is half from. I mean, her real name is Zandile Dlamini. And I found out actually that her dad is Crocodile from the movie Serafina, which, being a kid who I lived in East Africa for a bunch of my young life, that's a South African movie about these kids like during apartheid and like and just them dealing with the fallout of that. And it was a really popular movie, and so I watched that a bunch when I was a kid, and I was like, oh my God, her dad is Crocodile from that, which makes me feel really old, but also like, yeah, it was a fun fact. But anyway, so she was in South Africa, and it was her first time there, actually, first time performing, first time being there, and she was very emotional on stage, and she was like, saying like, I know I've never been here before, but it kind of feels like I have. And like they were chanting her real name, which is I mentioned. And she's very overcome and emotional. And I found it moving. There were some people who felt that it didn't mean much to them that she's like, taking in this moment and being like, very into her South African heritage. They feel like she has not really properly responded to all of that anti-Black stuff that they believe she's done in the past, and that she just has kind of moved problematically in general. And that's valid. To this, I would say, and I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that, my take is like wrong or right and yours is right or wrong. Like, I guess I just have my questions about when people are behaving problematically. And in this case, you have a biracial woman who is, people perceive as being a little or somewhat problematic around her Blackness. If later in life, she's kind of regaining this connection with it. I mean, she's raised by her white mother, who's a white Jewish woman, and her father was less in her life. So that's her primary parent, right? I personally don't have a lot of this like biracial, like beat poetry angst. I've mentioned that before, but I have, many friends and family members who are biracial who do. And that could be partially because I was raised by my Black father. It could be because I'm not that biracial presenting. I think especially in this country, I can pass for, just a fully Black person, and to some extent identify as one. But yeah, I can understand that many biracial people, especially ones who are not raised around the Black side of their heritage, have some issues around that. They often want to fit in a lot. And so some of their behavior can be a little unhealed around that. So I guess my lens on that is that I'm generally happy when they heal on it. And I'm just wondering, it's perfectly okay if other people don't feel that way, but I'm just wondering, is there a goal for these people who are behaving this way? And what is that goal? Is the goal that if you are behaving in these problematic ways, if you are, at a young age doing these problematic things, is the goal then that, okay, so we don't progress these kinds of people's careers, they just have to go away, they don't get a platform? Or is the goal that they learn and change and heal? And is our issue with her that she hasn't been accountable enough, maybe? Do we want her to be more accountable? Do we want her to talk more about that transition? Is that what we're looking for? Because I guess at some point I want to know if what we did not hope for is for her to be in South Africa in tears, like feeling like accepted and feeling like, proud of her Blackness, then what is the goal, right? So I don't know. Maybe it is the fact that she hasn't been accountable enough, and that would be valid. But yeah, it just really did make me think, if not about this instance only, do we maybe in general want to be a little bit more intentional about when we're holding people to account, a little bit more mindful of what we want to achieve from it and what we actually want the trajectory of that to be. So we hold them accountable. We point out their wrongs. We see, what they've done. And if they change, what do we want to happen next? And, I know that it's not like a monolith. It's going to be different person to person, depend on how they hold accountability, how they how they change. But yeah, so that's kind of my take on her. Essentially is that my personal reaction to seeing her in that space was, I was happy for her. And I hope that really got in. And I hope that this is just one of a series of shifts for her, if this ever even existed as an issue, because I can't verifiably find out if it did. And I don't want to speak for her. Maybe she just always felt, happy and wanting to connect with that side of her heritage. But either way, I was happy to see her do it. And if I'm ignorant about anything else to do with her, then, that would make sense, because I'm too old to know everything about Doja Cat. And finally, we have Rama Duwaji. So this is a bit of a hairy one. So this is Zoran Mamdani's wife, who's an artist as well, and a ceramicist. I should say her own vocation as well. But I mean, we know about her because she is married to the mayor of New York City. She's been under fire. It's my new phrase. In the last week or so for some old tweets that have kind of surfaced from her younger years, and in some cases, her very young years. So there's a few, and they're not all kind of around the same stuff, let's say. So some of them are very Israel-Palestine centered. So she has retweeted or liked, and this is like a few years ago, not that many, maybe like 3-4 years ago. She has liked and retweeted things that people who are very anti-Israel and very pro-Palestinian liberation have said or have written. And some of these people are considering extreme or have connected to Hamas. Haven't been able to verify a lot of that. But, as someone who's critical of Israel myself, I understood some of the strong worded things that she was saying. Like, for example, that our foreign policy in this country, I think, was one of the things that she said towards third world countries, or developing countries, I guess could have been a better phrase, but I think she used third world, has been really genocidal and murderous. And you know, I could say that our foreign policy is far from, you see, this is a hairy subject, but anyway, it's far from perfect. Some of the other things that she was tweeting were, for example, she used the F slur used against gay people and homosexuals a few times in her tweets, which is just, I mean, we can all just say that that's not acceptable. And I know that she was younger, but, you know, context, she's from Houston, Texas. She's half Syrian. And, you know, I know Houston to be liberal. Well, you know, it's a mix. It's Texas, so obviously, but there's a lot of different kinds of people there, different races. And I just don't think that she would have been ignorant to the fact that that's not a phrase that we throw around. She's very young. She's younger than I am. When I was a teenager, it was not in my circles considered okay to throw around that slur. And if anyone was using it, they knew what they were doing. And you could say when I was younger that a lot of guys were using that slur towards other guys that were not known to be homosexual or whatever, or they're just friends. And that's not okay either. But she can't even plead that. I do not think that it was like a normalized thing in Houston around when she was a teenager for random girls to be using that term. So that I can unequivocally say was just pretty straightforwardly not good. And then she was found using the N-word, the more colloquial, less hard-ended version of the N-word, but towards a non-Black person. And, you know, that matters. She didn't hurl that slur at a Black person. I do think that these dollars and cents matter. And I'm not saying these things to justify what someone does, but I do think it's important to be specific about what people do, because often it's bad enough. And if we start embellishing, it kind of takes your argument away. If you can't just be truthful about specifically what people say. Like, it really irritated me early on in the Trump days, like his first run when he said, you know, Mexico sends the rapists, you know, and people said they just cut out they send their rapists. They are rapists, you know. And since then he said worse. And even that was just what he actually said was terrible. But as soon as you start kind of, you know, picking and choosing and cherry picking and, like, you know, messing with what people actually say and blurring facts, you lose your foot to stand on. So what she actually did was use the, you know, whatever, the not hard art version of that. And she used it towards a friend of hers that was a non-Black person, just kind of to be like homie or whatever, I guess. Still completely unacceptable terminology. I believe she would know better coming from Houston, and I do not believe she would have said that in front of a Black person. So why is she saying it in private? Also, it seems like, well, not in private. She's saying it in public, but I don't think she would just go up to like a Black person in Houston and be like, "What's up?" I don't think she would do it. So keep that same energy, right? So that was off. And here's where we come into the accountability side of this, right? I don't like the things she was saying. You know, the anti-Israel stuff. I think there were some bloodier, gorier, crazier things that she was saying or that she was retweeting, which I'm just in general not into that kind of violent terminology, whether or not we agree on which side of that, what side of a genocide can you be on? We agree that we are anti-genocide. I don't necessarily agree with talking about, you know, killing people and whatever. That's just, I don't want to say not my vibe. I'm not into killing people. It's just not my thing. So that stuff I can really say that I don't stand behind. I do not stand behind using the F slur for gay people. And I 100 billion% know she knows better. And even though, yes, she used the more, you know, it's in rap songs, so why can't we say it version of the N-word, and the less, you know, Quentin Tarantino movie version of the N-word, I still believe she knew better, and I still believe she wouldn't have done that to someone's face or in front of someone's face who's Black. I don't think that this was an ignorance, not knowing, even at 15. Even at 15, I think this woman knew better. So I don't love it, and it does make me look at her in a different way. I didn't know how I looked at her before. I looked at her as like, a pretty wife of a mayor, and I wasn't, particularly interested, honestly. But now I'm interested with However, I do not think it precludes Zohran Mamdani from being mayor, that his wife said goofy things about, or said terrible things about certain sects. We voted. I didn't vote because I'm not allowed to, because I'm not a resident of New York City, but I voted in spirit for Zohran Mamdani. I did not vote for his wife. So if people are hoping to hold him accountable for that, I don't think that makes sense or is in order. And that's just where I'm at on that. 10 toes down. I also was, before I realized how problematic Bill Clinton was in many, many ways, I was like, listen, he doesn't have to be a good husband to be a president. And I know some people are like, oh, but his morals. His morals within a relationship can be divorced from his morals within a business and within running a country. And I do believe that that can happen. But the things that I found out about him since, I was like 10 years old, have changed my mind on that. And I do think that he should not have been in office, knowing what I know now. And maybe, who knows what I find out about Zohran Mamdani himself. But I don't believe that we can necessarily say that his views are the same as hers because of what she said when she was 15, when they didn't know each other, right? So that's where I am on that. But in terms of, if you want to divest yourself of this woman, have at it. I'm not interested in consuming any of her art or buying any of her pottery. So if you're on that side of things, we can agree on that. Anyway, with that, I'm going to leave my 30th episode and on to the 31st. And here we go. All right. Have a good rest of your week.